Today, I'm sitting down with Tom Koulouris, a seasoned builder, owner's representative, and professor at the University of Miami. Tom has built hospitals, luxury estates, and collaborative teams, bringing decades of insight from both commercial and high-end residential construction. What makes this conversation special is that Tom and I both graduated from the University of Florida School of Building Construction, widely regarded as one of the best programs in the country. Although our time there overlapped, we never met on campus, but recently we worked together on a 37,000 square foot estate here in Southwest Ranches, Florida. Tom's passion for education shows up not just in the classroom, but in how he mentors builders, guides homeowners, and builds successful teams. You'll soon see why he's one of the most respected voices in the industry today. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Rick. Pleasure to be here.
Great to have you. So to kick things off, could you give us a quick overview of your background and what you're focused on today?
Well, I don't know if it's quick. I've been at this a long time, some 43 years. But like you so aptly put it, we graduated from UF. For me, that was back in 1981, and that's when I started my career. And at the time, Rick, I was living in Tampa, where I grew up, Tampa, Florida, and quickly went to work for a small general contractor. And within a year, I had become the chief cost estimator. And Rick, in those years, all the work was basically hard bid. There was no such thing as any negotiated or GMP type arrangements like we see today. And so we did really, really well. And I didn't stay with that firm long. And within a year, I actually left and I started my own construction company, and I strapped on a tool belt and I had a carpenter and a mason, and we started building buildings. And I literally got to learn how to put a building together with my own two hands. For the next 10 years, I did that.
On-the-job training.
On-the-job training, right. I was running my company and building it at the same time. And I was super busy and things were going pretty well. Then an opportunity with a physician, a very prominent ophthalmologist in Tampa actually, contacted me and asked me to build his big home for him up in North Tampa. And I'd never built a home, a full home from ground up. We'd been doing commercial renovations and residential renovations like most contractors when they start out. So we built this home. It was 18,000 square feet, and that was in
Big home
in 1985,
Wow.
1986. You
Amazing.
bet it was. Well, the doctor liked me a lot, and he asked me to move my office into one of his medical office spaces. He had a number of medical office buildings around St. Joseph's Hospital in Tampa, if you're familiar with the area. And over the next 5 years, Rick, I built physician offices for every medical specialty that existed, and seemingly had a passion for it. And I understood the medical world. My family comes from a very long background of medical professionals, actually dating all the way back to the Civil War.
Wow.
World War I, World War II. My whole family's been in healthcare, and so it's no wonder.
You should have been a doctor.
So like I was told today at another project, I'm a building surgeon. Aptly put. So after that 5-year period of doing physician office build-outs and understanding what they need and the technical medical equipment that goes in certain doctors' offices, I received a phone call from the CEO of a hospital in Tampa, Florida. And they told me that they had a couple of contractors doing 2 projects and a couple of architects, and nobody could communicate with each other. And they needed somebody, and they called it a liaison. Now, this was 1989. And they asked me if I would just come be their liaisons to help the communication between the hospital people and the design and construction teams. And so I did that. And that turned into a 5-year arrangement.
So these were the seeds of the owner's representative in the commercial.
The term program management had never come out yet. This was way back. And so that hospital system, there was a 2-hospital system in Tampa, actually owned by AMI, American Medical International. They got bought by National Medical Enterprises, and that new company today is known as Tenet Healthcare. Well, Tenet wanted to move my family and I to Dallas, where they had their big service center, but I couldn't go. Our son was very sick at the time, so we did not go to Dallas, and the company promptly laid me off, which turned out to be a blessing in disguise. A week later, I got a fax on my machine. Now, these were the faxes that were like the scrolls.
People don't know what a fax machine is. It's a machine that actually scrolls up typed words.
Yeah.
It's very, very impressive technology.
Yeah, well, you actually had to unroll it to read it. And so I get home and I unrolled it, and there's an org chart. And scribbled up in the top right, fax your resume to this number, 615-344-2203, I believe it was. I remember that number. So I sent my resume, had no idea where area code 615 was, and I got a phone call 10 minutes later. Well, that phone call changed my life. And turned out that was Columbia HCA Healthcare that I had sent my resume to. I flew up there the next day. That was my first airplane business trip. They promptly hired me on the spot. Turned out that the person I interviewed with also went to University of Florida, was a semester ahead of me. So that was cool. HCA assigned to me the state of Florida and moved my family and I from Tampa to Fort Lauderdale. And for the next 8 years, I got to be part of a team to take the company from 32 acute care hospitals in Florida to 52 hospitals. And my responsibility was the design and the construction and the delivery of all of those hospitals and all the renovations and additions and everything else.
That's a lot of buildings in 8 years.
That was a lot of buildings. That was a lot of buildings. That was more than a couple of $1 billion over that time span, dollars in those days.
Now, I believe HCA was Rick Scott.
Rick Scott. He was the CEO of the company, actually Columbia. And then after he left, they reverted back to HCA. Rick later became the governor and is, he's a senator today. Those were extremely formative years. But what that did for me, Rick, in my career is unique to people in the design and construction, in that I was one of 5 men that built that department. And we were doing so much work that we were able to modify our delivery models. And delivery models are the methodologies and the ideologies and the processes by which an owner can construct a facility from concept to a term we coined called heads in the beds. It was about delivering the facilities. And in those years, Rick, everything was hard bid, more commonly referred to as stipulated sum.
Or fixed price.
Fixed price. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And so we left the hard bid world and decided that we wanted to be more partner-esque with our architects and our construction management firms. We needed them as much as they needed us. And it didn't make sense to be pounding on them and beating on them when we need the facilities that they can produce for. So we created partnerships and we set about being a very collaborative teamwork to collectively build these facilities, always pushing the limits on lowering cost, pushing the limits on speed to market, and accelerating the use of technology as technology was exploding through the 90s. So we did that. After I left HCA, I started to get recruited by other very large program management firms around the country.
So by this time, it was becoming a trend.
It was becoming a trend.
Correct.
Correct. And so these large companies would call me up and they'd say, Tom, we're going to pursue this RFQ or RFP somewhere in America. You help us win it. If you win, we'll hire you. And so I kind of became like this hired gun. Had a fantastic resume, great skills, great background, and we'd win many of these jobs and I would do these projects. And that went over and over and over again. And that was really cool. And then I was actually in San Antonio, Texas, doing a project at University Health System in San Antonio when a major earthquake happened in Haiti. You might recall that in 2010.
I think most people do.
Yeah. Well, just before that, I'd completed my master's in public administration and healthcare at UM. So I was beginning to become familiar with UM and become friendly with them. And I really enjoyed that time on campus. So I'm watching the news and I saw that the University of Miami, through an NGO called Project Metashare, had responded to the earthquake and were doing medical care. And so I felt so compelled to take my medical skills and my hands-on building skills and go to Haiti and help them. And so I did that.
How long were you there?
I lived in a tent for 6 months. Wow. We set up, we were the only operating trauma field hospital post-earthquake, performed several thousand major surgical procedures, saved thousands of lives, and I came back a different person.
Wow, that's commendable.
Yeah, thank you. So when I came back, though, I got laid off from the company that I had taken a leave from. Not unexpected, you recall, that was the tail end of the Great Recession.
2009.
But I didn't really care what had happened to me after I'd seen so much suffering down there. Well, so
different perspective on life.
Totally different perspective on life. So I went home and I was sitting home for about a week just recovering, and I got a phone call from one of the big three accounting and advisory firms, PricewaterhouseCoopers. And so I went to work for them and promptly started flying all over the country. And that role kind of morphed into something that I wasn't quite expecting, but it really kind of set the stage and married well with my skills. And that was doing forensic project management. And I would come in behind the auditors who had audited projects that I like to refer to as failed projects, projects that had grossly exceeded budget or grossly exceeded time. And, when auditors get called in on something, it's generally not good. And so I was appointed the person to help these organizations fix their projects or their departments. And after you do enough of those, you realize and you come to understand that all projects fail for the same reasons. And maybe we'll talk about that later. I thought, if we know why projects get into trouble, then why don't we have tools to prevent that? So for the last 15 years, I've been developing tools for just that very same thing. In the meantime, along the way, the University of Miami reached out to me and asked me if I'd help them set up the construction management department. Well, that was 2017. And I said yes. And I've been teaching there since 2017 in the master's program. And then last year, I actually started teaching undergrad. So I teach both undergraduate students in the School of Architecture and College of Engineering and at the master's program in both of those schools of discipline now.
You're a busy kind of guy.
Yes.
So you started in residential, well, actually more commercial. You transitioned to some residential. Then you got into hospitals and some major commercial type of construction and other big projects. So what are some of the key lessons you took from those experiences that you now carry into the high-end custom home building industry? Maybe elaborate a little bit more on this toolbox that you have.
Yeah, so my toolbox. So that's an evolving dynamic toolbox like most carpenters. Tools come and tools go. After you've worked on some 200 hospitals, you learn a few things or two. And what I really like about my career at this point in my career is it came full circle for me. Started in residential, went through this healthcare world to the uppermost heights of healthcare design and construction, and now back to healthcare. It's full circle in my career. I'll be 69 next month and still going strong and hard and still learning more. But now what I like is to give back. So in the big time professional program management world, when you're dealing with giant contracts and lots of people and revenue at risk and lives at risk, when you're working in hospitals, oftentimes opposite a wall where surgeons are doing procedures and very sick people, you learn a lot. You learn what's important and you learn what a need is and what a want is. And there's a clear distinction
100% agree.
Between the two. So it's become a great marriage, actually, from my commercial healthcare world back into the residential world. And I wouldn't say I'm 100% in residential. I'm still doing healthcare. I've got a couple of healthcare projects going right now and 2 ultra high-end homes going right now. So it's the dichotomy of mindsets, and
well,
that's really fun.
It's fascinating how you can actually transfer your skills from one totally different industry into a custom home build. And I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah.
I've learned from your toolbox. We worked together on this amazing 37,000 square foot home over a 4.5 year period from day one with the homeowners and the architects and the consultants all the way through the construction and the issues that you never really have on every job. But your toolbox can be super handy.
Well, here's one of the things that I bring into the world. When you're doing giant projects, hundreds of millions and even up to billions of dollars projects, and sitting with board of directors and CEOs and high-level people and pushing back, when that much money is on the table, you learn how to push back to do what's right for the project. And sometimes you have to say no. And having been through that fire many, many times and becoming a respected voice in the industry, I take that same boardroom skill and experience and I've applied it to these ultra high net worth individuals. And I think people that have not dealt in such large dollars and such mega important projects may sometimes be fearful to say no to an owner. Oh, I might lose the contract. Oh, I might upset the client. Nothing could be further from the truth. People with ultra high net worth or anybody, they want to be told straight. They don't want to hear what they think. Don't tell me yes, tell me the truth.
Well, I think that's one of the values that an
Right.
owner's representative brings to the table.
Right.
An experienced one that he can divide the line between what is correct and what's a fair
Right.
amount to pay for something and what the value is for
Correct.
buying the quality that you really need
Exactly.
in an ultra high-end home. So I think you give them the confidence to know that they're being treated fairly. And that's
Right.
what they want, is a fair shake.
Well, think of it this way. My role, while some people think, oh, an owner's rep always protects the owner, sometimes the owner needs to be protected from themselves, quite frankly. And so my role is to protect the project. Get to the end of the build successfully where all parties are still collaborative in nature. And sometimes I say no to the owner, and sometimes I say no to the builder and to any number of the team members.
So you're kind of like a referee.
I'm a referee, correct.
And the thing is with referees, some are good and some are bad. The most experienced people like yourself bring
Right.
a lot to the table.
Yes.
And that's kind of an issue,
Right.
I think, in the owner's rep world, because there are no clearly defined attributes or qualifications that you become an owner's rep.
No.
There's no certification.
No.
So to find the right person that really understands that's a bit of a trick. So from what I'm seeing is, the first ultra high net worth custom home that you built, we did together.
Yes.
Now you've moved on to others. So I'm assuming it's word of mouth that's kind of
Yes.
getting
100%
business.
word of mouth. Right. I don't advertise. I never advertise.
Right. So there's clearly a value there.
Yes.
All right. So your first owner's rep role, that, as we mentioned, came on Southwest Ranches on a 4.5-year project. Now you're on your second and third home,
Yeah.
helping other high-end
Right.
people build their homes. How did those experiences shape your understanding of the owner's rep role and the value this role brings to owners in the team? So now you've done this a few times. How do you introduce yourself to an owner that's never met you before? You've been referred. What approach do you take to explain to them your role?
Tell them straight up, just like I told you. My role is to get you from point A to point B, if B is the end of the project, where everybody's still collaborative. Do I protect the owner? Absolutely. But I also protect the builder.
So you set the ground rules early on.
Set the ground rules right off the bat.
Right.
Right off the bat. If I overprotect the owner when I know it's wrong, then somebody's going to get harmed. And if either party gets harmed or any of the team members get harmed, now you're in an adversarial role and people go to their corners, protective corners, and the fight ensues and nothing positive can come from it. When I got called in on these programs in my forensic time in my career, those were very difficult times, very difficult times. A lot of egos on the line, a lot of personalities on the line. Sometimes people lost their jobs. It's all very tough, but you've got to navigate the waters and do what's best for the project. If the project is not successful and you have a failed project, nobody wins. Nobody wins. The owner won't win and the builder won't win. And I want everybody to win. And I'm able to see clearly the path through that. My personality uniquely, I believe, qualifies me to look the owner in the eye and say, no, that's not right. I need you to do this and that. And to say to the builder, no, that's not quite right. And we work together. And you experienced that with me
I get it. Well,
a
it's
number of
because
times.
of your years of experience,
Right.
and I've developed a deep respect for your knowledge
you.
base and ways to unwind problems,
Mm-hmm.
creatively problem solve, collaborate. Like you said, that's one of the biggest parts of this
Yeah.
business is collaboration
Yes.
between the architects, the owners, the other consultants,
Yes.
the subcontractors. There's a lot of players that have to be put
Right.
together and work together as part of the team.
Yes.
And that's kind of what we had together in
Yes.
our experience.
And it went great. It's fantastic.
It becomes a very pleasurable experience
Yes.
for us as well as the owner. And I think at the end of the day, like you say, everybody feels like they got treated fairly, and we can all be very proud of the successful project
Yes.
that we worked on together. And I think that's definitely the plus side of a seasoned owner's representative, and that's something you absolutely bring to the table. So let's talk a little bit about the decision-making process, because for these major designs, there are so many different decisions to be made. How do you keep the owners from getting bogged down, and how do you build trust that's necessary for them to feel comfortable handing you the reins on such a personal project?
I've been doing program management a very long time. I can't imagine a time when I didn't have the reins. I don't know that it's anything that I do, more as it's my presence that causes it to happen. I believe that I'm a formidable force at a table when we have OAC meetings, owner, architect, contractor meetings, and other types. I have a presence, and I speak clearly and articulate. And when owners meet me and they experience working with me, it's just something that happens. I've never actually had to say, I'm the orchestra.
I think you build trust. I mean, sometimes it takes a little longer. Even as a home builder, usually it's the first 2-3 month adjustment when the project gets started, and everyone's a little bit tentative. Not so much us because we're experienced and seasoned, but the owners and the whole relationship. And once they kind of get that everyone's working together, the trust starts building. And certainly over the 2-3 year period, towards the end, everybody really feels comfortable that the decision is in the interest of the project.
Yeah, Rick, there's a management model, forming, storming, and norming. And for every team, those time frames are a little different. But in the beginning, everybody's kind of forming up and learning about each other and the personalities and what you like to have for lunch and how many kids you got and this and that and what kind of exotic cars or how well you hit golf balls, those kinds of things. And how are you going to work together? And then you start storming around and putting parts and pieces of the project together and learning how to work under a contractual environment, perhaps. And you struggle through some of the first obstacles that occur. And there's always obstacles on a construction project. For example, last night was my first night for this fall semester 2025, and I told my students when we got going, I said, so what is construction management? And everybody had a few comments, all the students. I said, construction management is about solving problems, not just one problem at a time, but multifactorial problems all simultaneously. One affects the other. It's problem solving.
And that's a skill you learn over time.
That's a skill you learn with people of different personalities, different backgrounds, and moreover, everybody at the table on a construction project defines success differently. So therefore, everybody actually has different goals in mind to achieve. So my role is as best as possible and is as reasonable as possible, see to it that everybody's definition of success is met.
And that's
a skill.
This is definitely a skill set because there's a lot of players, like we mentioned before, on every job site. And the cast of characters changes from one of our projects to the next, and they always will.
Right.
So.
And after you've gone through a few of those, then you've normalized and everybody knows their place and this is what's going to happen on the issues, and people begin to work proactively to solve them so that they don't wind up on an action list or they don't come to the table at an OAC where tough or sometimes difficult decisions have to be made.
So what's your method for allowing communication to flow between all these stakeholders? Because even on the project we worked on together, it got to a point where there was a lot of text going back and forth, and all of a sudden on Saturdays and Sundays, and I remember you very clearly said, halt,
timeout.
Friday, 5 o'clock,
stop.
Monday, 8 o'clock, start again.
Yeah, sure.
And that was adhered to a T.
Yes.
And I think it really helped people kind of unwind over the weekends and get together their thoughts.
So owners are naturally excited. I mean, they're getting something, and oftentimes the biggest purchase they'll ever make in their life or the biggest build they may ever be a part of. It's not
it's a very personal build.
Very personal. And we'll talk about that in a minute, how that is different than in the commercial world. Building a building is not a sprint. It's not going to be done tomorrow. It's not going to be done next week. It's not going to be done next season. It's a marathon, and you've got to pace yourself. And so constant communication late into the night, over the weekend, Sunday morning when you're having coffee is unacceptable. People need a break, need a timeout to come back refreshed on Monday morning at 8 a.m., ready to work hard, drive hard, kill it till Friday at 5. Do your best. But then it's pencils down, hammers down.
Yeah, and I think that break certainly is rejuvenating because without that, we're talking projects that can go 3 years plus, and it is a marathon more than a sprint. And everybody has to just kind of keep their head straight and keep focused on their goals.
Another thing I tell my students when I say, how many people does it take to build a building? And we did this exercise last night. Some of the students said 5, some said a couple of hundred, one person said 1,000. You know what the answer is? It's thousands. So, when you start at the core level, the core group, architect, project manager, builder, project manager, and owner's rep. I represent the owner. It's the three of us. And our primary charge and responsibility for however long the project goes is to ensure delivery of the project at the budget, at the schedule. Now, there's influences around there, like the actual owner, perhaps. There's stakeholders on the project. There's plan reviewers. There's building inspectors. Let's not forget the subcontractors and the hundreds of employees that they have. And what about the distributors that provide the bricks and mortar and all the thousands of parts and pieces to create a building? And what about the manufacturers that produce those products and provide the specifications and the owner's manuals? And what about the raw material manufacturers? Rick, it takes thousands of people to build every building.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you really start thinking about
And you
who's really
can't
involved.
And you can't have everybody talking to everybody. You lose control of the project. And so I like to use the analogy, the program manager is the conductor of an orchestra. You would not have an orchestra with all the different instrumental sections playing what they think. You would just have a cacophony of wildness. You have to control the communication.
But the orchestra is only as good as the players.
That's correct.
In the orchestra.
Right.
So, you could be the best conductor in the world.
Yeah.
But when you have a bad trombone player, how do you go about dealing with, let's talk about a failed contractor.
Yeah.
And it happens. It happens on many jobs. It's never,
More often than we know.
Not always the fault of the contractor or the owner making a bad decision, or even the subcontractor himself. Things sometimes happen.
Yes.
So how do you deal with that, mitigate when a contractor fails and having to replace them? How do you handle that?
Well, there's different levels of failure. There's, if you're talking in the case of the prime, like a prime contractor, the actual builder goes under. Fortunately, that's not ever happened in my career.
Right, it's more likely to be a subcontractor.
More likely to be a
supplier.
subcontractor, right. And I like to call subcontractors trade contractors because there's nothing sub about a subcontractor. Subcontractors know more about building their specialty than the architect or the engineers or me or you or anybody else. So I like to call them trade contractors. They're due that respect. But businesses get into trouble for all kinds of reasons. They underbid. They get forced into a low bidder sometimes. We'll talk about that in a few minutes if you ask me. And they get into trouble financially. And so the prime contractor, the general contractor or the construction management firm, can work to keep them afloat to finish their scope of the work. It's better if the original trade contractor finishes their scope of work. But in the case where they totally default, declare bankruptcy or other, and leave the job, it's a problem for the project because you cannot ever complete their scope of work for what's remaining in the balance of their contract. So it's a big time financial hit to the project and it's a schedule hit to the project. It's a schedule hit.
So your preference is, if it's at all possible, find a way to help that contractor.
Prop them up.
As long as they're being honest and fair.
Prop them up.
And something maybe happened beyond their means and say, look, here's how we can get you from point A to point B to the end of the project. It might cost you as the owner an extra 10% for that.
Just on that one trade.
For that one trade.
Maybe not even that, but I will tell you this. If you exit the original trade contractor and you bring in another one to finish the scope of the work, that cost to finish is going to be at minimum twice what the original whole contract was, sometimes 3 times more.
So keeping that original contractors, in essence, somewhat of, I'm going to say a bargain because no one wants to pay more than they had
It's a huge bargain.
But for the sake of the rest of the project, it's definitely worth
it.
Supporting the contractor.
Correct.
You're not trying to make him rich. You're not trying to make him whole. You're just trying to get through the project.
Right. And most trade contractors want to finish. They're upset that they, for whatever reason, they got in trouble.
Misbid a project. Sometimes they didn't come to tell you that they had some increases that were driving their costs so high. And this, sometimes they're just shy and they don't want to mention, my supplier raised my price by 30%. I have absorbed it, but I can't do it anymore. Now I'm going broke. It's like, well, why didn't you tell me?
We are experiencing and have been for the last, I would say, 7 or 8 years, the most volatile pricing times in the history of the design and construction community in America, maybe the world. Prices are all over the map. I'll give you an example. We used to know within $1 of a square foot what it would cost to build a hospital for years. We just knew. And over and over and over again, we'd hit those numbers. It was easy. Today, I wouldn't guess at the cost of a hospital without significant cost analysis that goes on for a while. And even then, you're not guaranteed. Tariffs, supply chain issues, manufacturer shortages, shipping and receiving, procurement, approvals, you factor all of those things in together. Trade contractors can't hold their prices when the manufacturers are constantly raising the prices.
Right. And I've seen this firsthand when they do run into these issues. And we've always kind of communicated that to the subcontractors. Don't hold back. Tell us what's going on.
Right.
Show us your numbers. We're not going to let you make more money
Right.
just because your costs went up, but we're going to help cover those direct costs.
Yes.
It's not an opportunity if you make another 10% on those
Right.
additional costs, but we want you to be whole. We want you to treat the owner
Yes.
fairly, and we want you to finish the job.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, one of the
that's
ways that trade contractors and builders get into trouble is by having to provide a bid in the first place. So I will tell you this, and this is the lesson learned from the commercial healthcare world. There are different kinds of delivery models, different ways to play the game. And I like to explain to my students, if a football team leaves Miami and goes to LA, it's the same set of rules on the gridiron, right? Well, it's not that way in construction. There's different rules, not from state to state, not even from city to city, but from project to project, the rules are different because of what's called delivery models. And there's 3 kinds of delivery models, and I'm not going to get into all of that. That's a whole lecture. But the notion...
You are a professor after all, I mean.
Yeah, but the notion of bidding to pick the lowest bidder is flawed. And here's why. You ask any architect, and I've asked many this, have you ever produced a perfect set of drawings without error, without needing clarification? There's not an architect in the world that will tell you, oh yes, I've done perfect sets of drawings. So let me ask you this, Rick. If the drawings aren't perfect, how can a bid be perfect? It's not. It's not. So why bid? Well, all you're doing is select.
So what's the alternative?
Well, so you're selecting somebody based off an artificial number, and anybody can turn in a low number. And then you have these things called change orders. While many owners are well-meaning and well-intended, and it's a big expense to build a home or a building, and there's a lot of exposure there. But going down the road of what's called stipulated sum or the hard bid world is the most riskiest methodology for an owner to build a building.
So what do you suggest?
So collaborative partner type delivery models. In our industry, there's a term that's actually part of a cost plus fixed fee delivery model called GMP, guaranteed maximum price. And I think that is, I know that is the path to the lowest cost. Now, what owners have to do is they have to divorce from their mind that they've been told from their friends and families and other members, oh, do this and oh, do that, thinking you're going to save money. You're not going to save any money. It's going to cost you. Bidding a project will cost you more at the end. So I ask you this, and I've actually graphed this out. Are you interested in the cost of the project at bid day, or are you interested at the cost of the project the first night you lay your head on your pillow in your brand new home? My guess is you care about the cost of the project that first night you spend in your new home. Hard bid won't get you there. Hard bid will cause you to cost more and take longer for all kinds of reasons. The better way is to understand up front what that cost is going to be, work collaboratively together with the design team and all the engineers, the builder, and the prime trade contractors. Work together as a team where people don't have to protect their little bids.
So this is a more transparent method.
It's totally transparent. Bidding, while it may be well-intended, and I think of owners as students, quite frankly, they need to be educated.
Yeah, because everyone,
Right.
As an owner, we all want the best numbers.
Right.
And I hear this all the time from owners. Of course, we all want to give them the best numbers. But
Yep.
it's not always the low number. It's the
No,
fairest number.
It's the fairest number, correct. So my advice to owners undertaking a home, do not choose based on price. I guarantee you will get in trouble. Choose based on the thought when you're interviewing, say you spend a day interviewing 3 or 4 qualified builders. Pick the one that you think you can work with for the next 2, 3, or 4 years. Think to yourself, can I work with this person and this personality for the next 3 years and build a home that I'm going to live in the rest of my life? That's what you should be thinking. Can I solve issues and problems when they happen? They will happen. There's problems on every construction site. And here's why. No 2 buildings are alike, Rick. You know that.
Sure.
So you're literally, in some ways, it's kind of like art, it's the intersection of art and science, really. Nobody's ever built that building before. You don't know how well it's going to go
These
together.
ultra high-end homes, every detail is
It's
something seen for the first time.
Correct.
Not every detail, but many of the
Correct.
details.
You're on a journey.
And they don't always work out. I think mock-ups have been one of the
Mock-ups
the
are huge.
best
Yeah.
methods to maybe solve problems
Correct.
before they happen.
Correct.
We've seen that over and over again, and I think that's one of the greatest methods to establish how you can
Yeah.
do something that hasn't been done before. And even then, it
Yeah.
doesn't always work right. So, Tom, let's kind of just move a little bit from your day job,
Sure.
working with hospitals and with owners on these beautiful, ultra high-end custom homes, which to me is such a pleasure to build. It's my favorite thing to build. Let's talk a little bit about, in addition to your project work, you spent time and you're still a professor at University of Miami. It seems like you're working even more in the school than you were before. So your
Yes.
position there seems to be getting more traction.
Yes.
Was there a
More.
building construction program when you started there? How did you end up in this position?
No. In 2017, University of Miami took it upon themselves to develop a construction management program, and I was invited to become one of the founding board members. And within a few months, they asked me, well, Tom, you want to teach a class? And I'm like, I have no background in teaching. Well, it turns out that's not true. So I got a knack for teaching and delivering.
You do it all day long.
I do it all day long. So now it's just more formal. It's what excites me now about my career. I love it. I love the excitement in my students' eyes and the way they lean forward and they're energized by what I share with them. There are no books. There are no PowerPoint in my class. What I teach, you can't learn on the internet. You may be parts and pieces, but that's not going to get you there. I explain it to my students like this. Why did you get an undergraduate degree? Oh, to get a better job or to do this or to do that. And I go, well, in any of your undergrad classes, did they teach you how to do your job? No. Okay, so what's the degree? The degree is a ticket to the dance. But in the master's program, under my leadership, I'm going to teach you how to dance so that you are successful on the first day of your new job.
And that says a lot.
what I
That
did.
says a lot because I think most people start their career, even myself. I went to University of Florida,
Same
school
here.
of building construction. It was great. But my first day on the job, thrown to the wolves,
Totally different.
was an eye-opener.
Yeah, technically proficient, but as far as performing the job in a productive manner, no clue.
Right. I didn't have a project manager over me. I didn't have anyone teaching me.
Nope.
It was like, you're a college
swim.
boy, you can figure it out,
Yeah, sink or swim.
basically.
Yeah.
Basically. So you're giving them more tools so they
Yes.
can succeed.
Correct. And it's those same tools that I give to clients. It doesn't make sense that a client, a homeowner, partaking on a multi-million-dollar home with no professional skills in project management or in the design and construction industry has the wherewithal to take on the management of a project and to be successful. That's one reason why there's people like program managers and project managers. I have to educate the owners in the exact same manner that I educate my students. It's the same exact thing. However, the owner is emotionally involved with the home, and that's very different than an administrative team building a hospital. Now, they may have a lot of stressors to produce revenue and things of that nature in the business world, but it's not a personal, emotional decision. And for a homeowner to see clear-minded and tough negotiations sometimes, or to navigate difficult problems on a construction site when they are emotionally involved, will lead to a disaster.
Yeah, it is such an emotional purchase. I mean,
Right.
this is their forever home. They're up at night
Yeah.
thinking about the design and the layout and the cost.
Yeah.
And there's so many things going through their
Yeah.
head. So someone like you, kind of like a psychologist at a
Yeah,
certain point.
a lot. I'll tell you one of the things that I have owners say, oh, well, my friend said this and my doctor said that and so on and so forth. And they take friends and family's advice that is no more accurate than the man in the moon. And that's what gets a lot of people in trouble. They're not grounded in solid business management practices in the design and construction industry, which is very unique.
Right. So another
Right.
thing that you also do is time is the most valuable asset for anybody.
Yes.
And particularly someone with ultra high net worth. They're busy. Their days are,
Yes.
are packed with
Yeah,
decisions.
right.
And they're flying from here to
Yes,
there. And
exactly.
so to have boots on the ground, someone that represents
Doesn't
them,
make sense.
you can help them navigate this
Yes.
journey in a way that they can't just do by themselves. And I encourage anyone doing a house that once you're getting into the 20,000, 25,000, 30,000 square foot, these homes are $25 to $75 million.
Yes,
These are not
right.
inexpensive homes.
Exactly.
Big purchase for anyone.
Yes.
I don't care if you're a
Yes.
multimillionaire, a billionaire.
Yes. One time in your life, you'll do it.
And it's emotional, like you said.
Yes.
So to have someone on that team that's watching your dollars, but also making sure you don't
Right.
hurt yourself.
Not emotionally involved.
Right. Because you can easily hurt yourself as a homeowner.
Right.
And as a builder, our goal is similar to yours. We want
Yeah.
to finish that project.
Right.
We want the owner to be happy.
Yes,
We want
exactly.
everybody to feel they got a fair
Yes.
shake. And when they live in that house, and when I run into them at Publix
Mm-hmm.
and I say hello, I want them to say hello back. And how you doing? Oh, how's the house? And I hear this from homes we built 20, 30 years ago.
Yep.
They come back and say, wow, I love my house. Or maybe they moved out by then. I wish I still had that house. And that to me is so rewarding. And I think you kind of get that same satisfaction when you have a completed project.
Yes, correct.
So,
Correct.
And that's really
Yeah.
cool.
In summary, Rick, I think I would say if there was a potential client there, I'd say, here's 3 don'ts or 4 don'ts. Don't try to behave like the project manager. That's number 1. Don't bid. Bid will get you in trouble. Don't go to the job site every single day expecting to see major improvements or progress. Construction projects move slow. They take months and months, sometimes years, and don't make changes. And I
The
guess
last one's a little tougher.
don't make change. Well, in my career, owner requested changes are by far the largest component that create the change orders.
We see the same exact
You
thing.
see the same thing.
Yeah, of course.
Change orders are a fact of life.
Right.
It's how you navigate the change order.
Yeah, but our goal, again, is to make sure the owners understand the impact of these
Yes.
changes. So if it's going to raise the price, they understand that. But they also have to understand it's an impact of the time.
Yeah.
Impact of the management. It's a stressor. It's one extra
Correct.
thing that the management has to look out for and make sure while they're managing the new change, they don't make a mistake on something else.
Look, here's a very simplistic way that I've shared with owners both in hospitals and in residential. Having a building built or a home built and getting a price is not like buying a loaf of bread. Now, this is very simplistic, but it paints a beautiful picture. At the grocery store, the loaf of bread, whatever it costs you, $5 for a loaf of bread, you expect to get a loaf of bread. And it's not that way in construction. In construction, you want to look at the slices of bread in the loaf. And in construction, there's 5 slices of bread. 3 of those slices make up 85% of the cost. And that's where you need to work, not on the total number.
So what are the 3 slices?
So when you look at a contractor's price, there's 5 components that make it up, but the 3 of the 5 are it. And so it's the contractor's fee, which can be negotiated up front, a flat fixed fee. That's one way to do it. The other way is what's called the general conditions. And the general conditions are the cost of the builder's staff on site to manage the project. And that's where project managers and superintendents and project coordinators and procurement people and cost estimators reside. If you will, that's the cost of the people that are in the construction trailer that are overseeing the work. And that's called general conditions. Those are largely people's salaries, for 90% of that. The single biggest component, which represents 85% of the builder's cost, is not the builder's money. It's the cost of all of the subcontractors put together. Now, the builder can provide bids from all of the trade contractors, but that's called cost of work. All the builder really does is add it up and pick the lowest responsible bidder. So the builder is not any more responsible for the trade costs than the man in the moon.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
So if you want to lower the cost, it's not about beating up the contractor and driving down fees, which are insignificant to the total. It's not about beating up the general conditions because the contractor is just going to have fewer people, which causes problems
down the road.
downstream.
Of course.
Work on the scope of the project, work on the big prime contractors like the shell and some of the major interior finishes like flooring, casework, plumbing, electrical, mechanical, and roofing. Work on those few trades.
Well, that comes back to wants versus needs.
Wants versus needs. Work on that slice of bread, what's called cost of work. And if you really want to move the cost needle, that's where you work. And you do it collaboratively with your design team.
Right. I think my favorite tool in your toolbox is the pain menu.
Pain menu.
The pain menu.
Yeah, that works well.
Yeah. So you might want to, can you explain
Yeah,
a little bit about how
sure.
that works?
So that actually developed that on one of the hospital project's actually here in Miami, believe it or not. And then I tested it again on a mega project out in California. So in both of those cases, the projects were coming in way over budget. You can imagine physicians are emotionally involved in having ORs built and cancer treatment centers and other medically advanced spaces. And so they want. And they're telling the architects, and sure enough, the drawings come out and the budget comes in huge. And so I thought, well, how do we lower the cost of the project without sacrificing the program being the square footage and certain key elements that make it successful, especially if you're talking about a revenue producing type project. So we put together a list. We gather from all the design team, what are things that could be done? And you might get a list of 50 or 60 items if you're lucky. Categorize those items into things that are no pain to accept. No pain.
Give me an example.
A pain might be, instead of high-end marble flooring that might cost you $50 a square foot, maybe a less expensive marble.
Or porcelain.
A porcelain.
That's beautiful, looks just like it.
No pain. Simple, right? And you may have quite a few numbers, and you add up those, and oh, look, there's $75,000. Easy, low-hanging fruit, done. And then we categorize some others that are, we'll call them medium pain. It's like, well, yeah, I can really want that, but I don't have to have it. And that's kind of the intersection of a want versus need. Yeah, but I could save $300,000.
Right, I want a 10-car garage, but I probably can get by with a 6.
Probably, that's good enough. Okay. And then there's the high pain, which starts to cut into some programmatic issues. And then the owner has a choice. You can accept what's put before you. If you don't accept it, then you know you have to increase your budget cap. And it comes down to a data-informed decision versus an emotional decision.
So a house can morph from call it a $10 million project to 12.
Overnight.
Maybe you can cut it back to 11, but the owner's comfortable with 11 because he's informed of that he has to spend that extra $1 million to get what he wants. And these are needs, not so much wants. And the wants, guts to haves, he's willing to pay for it. Then he gets the blessing.
Well, and so when you go to hard bid, one of the reasons why that's problematic from day one is because of this. The owner may have shared with the design team what they wanted to spend. And this is not a knock against architects, but architects want to design what the owner wants. And the cost of the project seemingly is always secondary. And so the owner really doesn't know the cost of the project until the drawings are complete and they put it out to bid and the bids come in way higher. And so now the project is already on their back foot.
So this brings to one of your other sayings is design to budget.
Design to budget.
I say it all the time now.
Yeah, design to the budget.
I'm a big believer.
What a novel idea. How do you do design to budget? It's simple. You can't bid in the design to budget world. In a design to budget world, you got to have the design team, that's your architect and engineers, and you got to have the builder married together from day one.
Same thing we talked about earlier, collaboration.
Right, collaboration. And when the architect prepares some sketches, we call it concept sketches, the builder can give an opinion of cost or what they believe the cost is, and the owner can go, oh, okay, yeah, no, that's good. I'm good with that. Go to the next level, schematic design. Design work happens. A set of schematic drawings come out, the builder can price the schematics. Oh, it went up $5 million. And the owner can say, oh, yeah, but I want everything in there. Okay, well, the budget's up
or conversely, pull it back a little.
Or you can pull it back. You do not want to get to the end of the design cycle to find out that you can't afford the building.
Yeah, nothing hurts me as a builder more than for someone to come for our first meeting together and they said, here's my beautiful house.
Yes.
And they said, the architect said it could be built between $400 and $600.
Doesn't matter what the architect says. It matters what the builder says. The architect
and any builder worth their salt is looking at it saying it's $1,000 to $1,300,
right.
And you have to kind of present the reality to them. But they spent year and a half designing this house, and they're totally engaged, and this is their baby. And
here's how I say.
Now you have to take it away and start hammering away at it.
Why didn't the owner just hire the builder to design it?
Because the builder doesn't do design.
Then why would you ask the architect what it cost when they have no clue and no input into the trade contractors and the constructability?
And I think that's something that architects from my experience, some architects, and this is not a slam against architects, we're friends, we're collaborators.
Right.
But sometimes this is a little bit of fear that the builder is going to quash the beauty of the design. And nothing can be further from the truth. We want that
Right.
design to be beautiful.
Exactly.
But we want
Correct.
the owner to be able to afford what they're building.
That's
And
exactly
at the end of the
right.
day, this is their
Right.
dream home. And they have to be able to merge the dream with what they can afford.
The dream can never be repaired if the owner discovers they can't afford it.
Correct. So that's something that,
Right.
again, your whole design to budget
Yeah.
concept really brings home as a concept. And one of the reasons you really want to bring an owner's representative on early, because
Just to navigate these waters.
100%,
these
you can
pathways.
help bring together
Right.
the team, set the standards, set the stage for what the owner wants at the very beginning, and start that collaboration at the beginning.
Buildings are very sophisticated now, and you need sophisticated construction management techniques to navigate these waters.
Okay, so any final takeaways or messages you'd like to leave with our listeners, or reflections over your career that you'd like to share?
Well, that's why I teach, because I get to share all that back. It's like they give you a whole semester, but like I mentioned before, there's a few don'ts. Don't bid. Select builders and architects based on whether you believe you can work with them for a number of years together. Work collaboratively, handpick the key trade contractors, hire an owner's representative or program manager to help you navigate these waters, and you got to go into it with an open mind.
Well, thank you so much, Tom, for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Rick. My pleasure.
Having you both as a colleague and a friend, and sharing your thoughts on the Insider's Guide to Custom Homes.
Thank you.